Well, I can see I'm going to have to get some sort of in-out thingy. Zach, if you happen to be watching this, I'll be talking to you soon. Let's see. Welcome to the Curmudgeon, or the Curmudgeon welcomes you. How do we go? Anyway, first thing I want to talk about tonight, and that is writing. Is it an art? Is it a skill? Skills are something you can learn and pick up and refine. Art is something that comes naturally. That may later be refined. I've been noticing a lot of posts on social media. I gotta remember to look up at you guys. I've been looking at a lot of posts on social media lately that ask about, writer's block and stuff like that. And I get the occasional private message or email about, hey, I'm stuck. What do I do? Well, how do you deal with it? I've even seen a couple of threads posted at various places over the last couple of years about this. Well, if I was teaching creative writing in school, which I'm not because I'm a retired teacher now, I don't teach anymore, this is what I would say. Everybody has a different way of going about it. There are some fundamentals, most of which I ignore. I didn't always get great papers, I didn't always get A's on the papers that I did in high school because I was still finding my voice, trying to follow formats for themes and outlines and, stuff like that. And that really wasn't where I was yet. And until you find your voice, I don't really think you're going to do really well at stuff that you're required to do. But in any event, my system is what I call the percolator. I get an idea, whether it's for this presentation, whatever we call this thing, whether it's this or it's something that I'm going to post on Facebook or start a conversation on social media with, or it's an adventure or something of that ilk. I percolate right now in the back of my head, literally. And when you think of percolator, don't think of a coffee pot. Think of how water percolates through porous stone. Yeah, okay, it means I got a head full of porous stone, more or less. The metaphor works, though. I got 3 adventures back there. They've been percolating a long, long time. They're ready now. I'm not. Back when I was writing under a deadline or writing for a deadline or writing for a magazine or a project that I was doing with Eldritch, whether it was my project or I was collaborating or whatever, I would just sit on stuff and let it percolate in the back of my mind. And percolate in the back of my mind means that, excuse me, pardon me, still got that head cold. Percolate in the back of my mind meant that I would think about it at odd times. It was kind of like it would, or if you want to use a stew or the gumbo, it would rise to the surface every now and again. I'd examine it, I'd think about it, whatever. And then I would know when it was time. Back when I wrote these blogs instead of doing the video, I would know when it was time to sit down and write it. I felt I was ready, and so I sat down. Now, my writing style is very much like this video style. That's pretty much stream of consciousness. I know how to make a right sentence and a correct sentence. And I also know good grammar, but I don't always use it. I found writing for me is easiest when I write like I talk, which is more flowing and free-flowing and here and there. Now, when I sit down and say I'm ready for the percolator, sometimes I'll sit down and I'll knock out a very sketchy outline. And when I say very sketchy, I don't think the whole outline for my Curse of the Weaver Queen module contained probably more than 40 or 45 words from either keywords. And usually it's because I want to make sure I get them in. I don't even outline them or jot them down necessarily in the order I'm going to use them. I'll go back and forth and check stuff off and make sure I hit it in the right place. But that's my style. Now, I can't help you if you're still in school and you got to write under a deadline. Deadlines sometimes can really make the juices flow. Many fill-in article, many a Dragon Rumbles or whatever I called it in other magazines, editorial was done at the last minute because that's when I wrote that stuff. That's when I wrote it the best. My best work was under pressure to think about it. Now, but then I'd probably been thinking about the idea for a few days anyway. So if you get a writer's block, what do? Well, when I was in TSR and we got into the gray building, and when they moved out down to the other building and I took over the whole thing, I had the greatest solution for writer's block in the world. I had a 20-gallon tank full of tropical fish. And if I blocked, I'd simply turn off my typewriter. Yes, I had one of those crude things, but it was electric. I would turn my chair 180 degrees and I'd look at my fish tank for 3, 5, 12 minutes maybe. But it always seemed to clear the clutter in my mind, and it always enabled me to go on ahead. Looking at fish, here's a good one for you. One of the reasons that when you go into a senior care facility, whether it's assisted living or whatever, they very, very often keep big tanks of fish. Now, they may hire a company that maintains them for them. The fish have a calming effect. Watching those little fishies swim back and forth has a calming effect. Now, that's in direct opposition to when I'm trying to catch those little largemouth buggers. Then I got adrenaline pumping and everything else going. But for writing, that's one thing to do. You're on a computer, play 6 games of solitaire. Play poker. Don't have to play a whole game. Just sit in, play one of the sit-in versions, whatever. And the last 3 or 4 years, I guess I've played at least 100,000 hands of poker. I just go and I play, getting a quick game or something, play for a little while. Okay, ready to go back, write some more. That's how I do it. How you do it, I don't know. You got to find a goal. You got to find an incentive. You got to have something. With me, it was always deadlines. I got to get this thing done in time to get into the zine. All right, I'll get it done. And it's the way I wrote a lot of my papers in college, too. But that's when I write the best. I don't know. My creative juices work best under pressure. What can I tell you? Okay, on to something else. All right. I was asked, in terms of different style of play. Now, once again, I'm not saying superior or anything like that. I'm saying different style of play. What do I think that modern RPGers don't do enough of? And I believe that to be very simple. They don't ask enough questions. Now, I'll admit that I can be at a table and have a couple of people that are just bombing me with question, and I may appear to get annoyed. But I'm really annoyed at myself because I can't answer them quick enough. And they're piling up on me. Not because you're asking for information, because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be gathering information. It's not enough to know that somewhere in a ruins on the third peak from the right after you cross the raging river falls in the Squamish River mountains, there's a huge treasure. All right, well, we need some information, don't we? How are we going to get to there? How are we going to get across the raging river, et cetera, et cetera? What did the other guy used to do? What was he into? What might we expect to find? Was he a necromancer and we're going to find undead crap? Was he rumored to be a vampire and we may find him? Okay, information. You go into a room or a hall or an area in the place you're exploring. People just don't ask questions like we used to. And I don't know exactly why that is, but I have an idea. It has something to do with the proliferation of skills and abilities, which, as you well know, I've said many times in the past, I'm not a big fan of. Over-reliance on skills and abilities stunts gameplay. Old school is all about getting information. When the information you've gotten indicates that you'll get your butt kicked if you go ahead with what you're doing, that's when you run away to fight another day. You gather more information and figure out, okay, this information tells me how I can defeat this thing. Whatever. Not enough questions. In my old face-to-face, which I shit canned a couple of years ago at convention season start, I had a couple of guys that I'm certain must have played the later editions because they sat around and they never asked questions. They just were always surprised that they didn't know something when it happened. I guess they thought I was supposed to tell them without them asking or even recognizing the fact that they were involved in the game. So that's how I'd answer that question. Let's see. Oh, I touched briefly recently on the games that I played in the service, but I think it's interesting to note a couple of other things. For instance, back during the height of the Cold War, the Navy's boomer submarines, the big bad ones, the missile subs and the boomers and the Polaris and Trident, and okay. Anyway, the big bad subs, there was 2 crews for every vessel, a blue crew and a gold crew. As far as I know, in the period between 1975 and 80, virtually every crew in the submarine fleet had some guys that played D&D. Every single one. Many of the boats had a set of the rules and dice and what have you that belonged to the boat. And so they would rotate the crews. The boat would be in for 3-4 days, refuel, restock, whatever. Fresh crew gets on board, off they go. Now, some of them, I'm told, also had a set in the barracks that they shared. This was during the height of the Cold War. Doesn't it? Think of the hunt for Red October. And they're listening for that weird screw thing. And all of a sudden they hear, yeah, I killed him. Because those guys up in the torpedo room were playing D&D on a blanket and they forgot and they shouted. And they just killed the wizard. And then the death charges rained out. Grizzly. I got several interesting phone calls from active duty service personnel from several different military installations, in most all the cases using equipment I'm sure they have no business using. One time I got a call at about 3 a.m. Woke me up. This guy on the other end was so excited to find out that he'd found me, and he proceeded to tell me how he'd been calling around he had a map and he was calling every little town. He started Lake Geneva, every little town in an increasing circle. Blah, 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 blah. And I asked him, man, do you realize it's 3 a.m.? He goes, no, I'm under the mountain. And I said, what? Well, he was under White Mountain out in Colorado, and I guess it's a SAC base or something. And about every 13 minutes, he'd go, just a minute, and I'd hear this clicking and popping and squealing noises, and he was transferring satellites. Because we didn't have enough in geosynchronous orbit, he had to catch them as they went by, and then catch the other one as it went by to keep up our phone conversation. Over the course of my stay at TSR, I got 3 such calls from 3 different individuals that all thought they were brilliant and the first ones to have done it. I also discovered that there was a nuclear blast resistant facility under Camp David when some geek in the Army called me up at work one day at TSR, and we went through the whole satellite thing and the whole 9 yards. And yeah, he was calling me from underneath Camp David in the bomb-proof shelter thingy, whatever, that apparently almost no civilians knew about at that point in time, unless you were a high official in Washington. So it's good to know that the SAC Defense and the submarine patrol were all killing goblins. Gives you a warm, secure feeling, doesn't it? Did to me. Let's see, what do we do next? Oh, all right. I've seen some things. DMs lamenting, oh, how do I get such and such out of the game? How do I crack this? How do I crack that? Well, I'm not going to look you in the eye like this and lie to you and say that never happened to me. My God, the first dungeon I built together before I started the campaign in Carbondale with the very first crawl that I set up so we could all learn the game, I had stuff in there that I will never put in another game until they are really high level pair. Oh, I didn't know. So I'm rolling on the charts and I'm rolling on the tables and I'm putting in wishes and I'm putting in stuff. And basically what I was doing was I was putting in gamebusters. And that seems to be a problem for some DMs is gamebusters. Well, my first question, and then we'll dispense with that, is why in the hell did you put it in there in the first place? If it was a conscious decision on your part and now it's running amok, well, that's one of those old DM lessons about you better make sure you're smarter than your players and don't just assume it. Because the collective hive mind of 3 to 8 players in your group is always going to eventually figure it out and outthink it. That's the beauty of this game. You take 8 brains and meld them all together in no problem-solving device. Problems get solved, most Goshi. Chop, chop. So, I'll give you an example of a game buster. And this is going back to a board game. And it's going back a ways. It's a classic. And it might even have been a strategy and tactics magazine game before they boxed it. It was a game called Sniper. It was the very first one counter, one man game that I had encountered. When it came out in the magazine, I'm pretty sure it was the first that was a tactical level like this. I know I played it at Carbondale and we ate it up. We just loved it. Just loved it. Because we're naming the counters and, we're doing old combat TV shows, dialogue references and everything. But in that game, they had one thing that was a game buster as written. And that was the rifle grenade. If the rifle grenade had actually been as simple to use and effective in real life as it was in that game, we'd have just shot gazillions of those little buggers into the jungle and just marched our way across defoliating the jungle. Needless to say, it was a game buster because if you tried a couple, 3 times, because, they're not that easy to use. They were a little too easy in this game. But a couple, 3 attempts would lob a couple of these in, and it was turn out the lights, the party's over. And so everybody was running around with the maximum number of rifle grenades. Each of their soldiers had the maximum number of rifle grenades, and they were lobbing rifle grenades at each other all over the place. So that's a game buster. I imagine if they redid that game today, they'd probably tone that down. They'd use percentile dice because there's no stigma against percentile dice, though back in the day, they thought that if they used percentile dice, I guess they thought they'd want to take up ballet and wear tutus or something. And so they stuck to their 6-siders and the limitations of that system. Anyway, if you get a game buster, break it. Take it out. Be careful you don't put it in first. If it happens, shame on you. Nobody should have a mighty axe of smiting that drains levels, permanently drains intelligence, and causes your next 3 generations to stutter. Because now your bloodline is cursed. What were you thinking of when you made that? Believe me, if you don't believe anything, not anything that I have said in any of these videos, believe this. Your players will find a way to take something that you thought was relatively mundane, and they will find a way to turn it back upon you, and you won't be able to do a damn thing about it because it's all legal in that all the things that have happened up to that point in time say, oh yeah, I gotta let it work that way. They don't need the nuclear option. Okay? They don't need that. Now, I got a question a couple of weeks ago. I get all the questions. What was good about working at TSR? What was bad? Well, I'm going to tell this story anyway, and it might make me sound like I'm kind of nasty. I did it. For 5 years, I maintained, well, actually more than that, I maintained the facade. The hardest part of being where I was during the period of time that I was, during that stage of this hobby's existence, the hardest thing I had to do was listen to countless adventure retails. It's a skill to keep your eyes from glazing over. When that day at the booth, the 48th guy comes up and wants to tell you about the last great adventure, his character, Dumblick, the 14th, accomplished. And it was politic. It was good for sales, as Gary and Brian pointed out, as they did the same. We pasted a smile on our face. Oh, and pretended interest. I still get private messages. I'm glad you had a good time. Unless it's a story that you feel you could pull out at GaryCon in the bar and amongst a group of 20 guys sitting around and girls, women, men, drinking spotted cows. If it's a story that has something so unique in it that it would fit that type of thing, okay. If it only bring you scorn and opprobrium, if you spoke up at the thing at to your local con with that lame adventure, that's your rule of thumb. If, that's my rule. That's my cutoff. I know you had a good time. We set out to provide you the method for that good time. And we're delighted, those of us that are still alive. But, I don't know what the guys that are dead think about it. Hopefully they're having a good time and thinking about it too. In any event, we're delighted you're having a good time. Please don't harsh ours by telling us every mundane adventure. Now, if you had this really bizarre thing happen and it's a funny anecdote at that, yeah, most of us have senses of humor. We like funny too. That was the hardest part I had, particularly with TSR, was listening to adventure stories. I didn't get quite so many when I was going to cons with Adventure Gaming Magazine. And I still get one once in a while. But usually now the ones I get are those epic stories that you tell several years later when you're sitting around at a con late at night just telling yarns that are mostly true. Mostly true. I have occasion to sit in on a couple of them, and it's actually they're recounting something that happened at a game I was there. And I guess that's sort of the way it went down. Yeah, it's sort of the way it went down. As you can see, I'm all puffy and my eyelids are all swollen and everything tonight. Like I said, I've got a head cold. I look worse than usual. And then to top that off, I have Band-Aids on my head. I'm waiting for the biopsy results. I've already had one cancerous thing taken off my head, so I'm waiting to see what's new. But hey, it's just skin cancer, no big deal. And I gotta, I haven't looked at early, so it's, no big deal, no big deal. I'll probably do another one of these in a week, and then I'll skip a week because I'll be going to TotalCon, and then I'll come back and I'll do one about TotalCon, and then I'm going to skip a week because I go to GaryCon almost again right away. So over the next few weeks, I'll see you when I can, and in the meantime, keep having fun and finding new ways to play. Oh, before I close, anybody's coming to TotalCon Friday, 7 o'clock. There's a bunch of openings in Dirt Track Saturday night. You don't want to miss this. If you've got an opening, then come on by. I promise you, you're going to have some fun. If you don't, I'll beat you. Good night. I gotta figure out how to turn this off.